What if your next blog post or article, not a memo or a brief, was something that brought people to your firm? You're listening to the Real Lawyers podcast brought to you by LexBlog, and I'm Kevin O'Keefe, your host. The podcast is for lawyers and legal professionals who use blogging or want to use blogging and publishing, even podcasting, to build a name, build relationships, and to grow their book of business over time. And in today's episode, we'll look at what that really means in practice, and who better, really, than someone that did it from the start, beginning years ago. So welcome, Nicole Black. Great
Thanks.
to have you here.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. I mean, everybody starts out as a lawyer, I guess, in this practice. So you were practicing, what, in public defender's office when you first started practicing, or where did you start?
Yeah, I started in the public defenders, and I moved over to a litigation firm, and then I was of counsel to a DWI defense firm. So I practiced for about a decade.
And then you started writing, whether it was books or publishing or articles or whatever. How'd that all come about?
Well, when I initially returned, I took a 2.5-year break from practicing law. And when I returned, I hung a virtual shingle doing contract work for other lawyers, which led to me becoming of counsel to a DWI defense firm. And when I hung that shingle, I had lunch with my cousin, who was a lawyer and who had been a mentor to me throughout my career. And as he was walking away from me, this was in 2005 at lunch, he looked over his shoulder and he said, I heard about this thing called blogging on NPR. You might want to check that out. It might help this thing you're trying to launch. And I hadn't heard of blogging at the time, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it seemed like a really good way to, at the time, show lawyers that would potentially hire me to do research and writing for them, that I was still up on the changes in the law, that I could write well, that I had, strong analytical thought processes. And so initially I launched my blog Sui Generis, and I started writing about New York cases, appellate cases as they were handed down.
I mean, did you have reservations about even starting? Like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do it right? Am I do it wrong? What if I embarrass myself? How did you just break through and say, okay, I'm going to start this?
I've never been one of those people to spin my wheels. I decided I was going to do it. I knew I had strong writing skills. That's been really a place where I've excelled my entire life. So, and I knew I could summarize cases. I mean, listen, I've been doing that for a decade before that. So,
Right.
in the beginning, I just would summarize cases as they came down, and I wasn't at all worried about that. And then over time, I sort of expanded the focus of what I wanted to talk about. But for me, launching it was just a way to give myself a routine and a schedule every day, and something to think about and something to do, and a way to start connecting with other people that were out there doing the same thing. And there weren't a lot of us back then.
What happened as a result of it? I mean, what started to happen now that you had this blog? I mean, obviously you said you connected with some folks, but what more happened?
So initially, I just got to know other people that were blogging, and then I decided, I reached out to the Daily Record here in Rochester, which is it's a Bridgetown Media, now owned by them, legal newspaper, and also our local bar. And I said, hey, listen, I'm blogging. Seems to be a great thing for lawyers to be doing out. How about I write an article that explains this, and why lawyers might want to think about doing this. And so I did that. And then, right around that time, social media became a thing. And that's where I really got to know everyone even more. In
Right.
2007, Twitter rolled out. And I think that was around 2006 when Facebook became available to people without EDU email addresses. And so I was getting to know people more there. I was using social media myself, and I thought lawyers really should understand social media. So I also started, and I started speaking to lawyers about blogging at the time. And then I expanded it to social media. And uh, the editor of the Daily Record, whom I'd written one or two columns or articles for at that point, asked me if I wanted to write a column that focused on legal technology. And around the same time, I think I had attended maybe a tech show for the first time, and maybe Legal Week. And that's where I got to meet everyone in person that I'd been interacting with online. And I got to know Carolyn Eloquent, who I'd actually had emailed very early in the game
Right.
all started. And she told me that she had a book deal pending with the ABA, American Bar Association, to write a book on social media for lawyers. And, she had a deadline coming up, and would I be willing to co-author it with her to help her meet that deadline? And so I did, and everything kind of started to arise from that, the connections I made because of the blog.
Yeah, I mean, it's about when I probably met you at the same time too. We all started showing up, I think, at the ABA Tech Show. All of a sudden, we're meeting these people that we had run across each other online. Was it yours blossomed in a lot of different directions, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Questions I wanted to ask you as to how you got into legal tech even too. Um, Was it growing your practice too, or your notoriety, so you were at least getting work in the area that you wanted to get work in?
Well, I was definitely getting, I mean, one of my first clients ever was someone who had discovered me, I think probably in the comments section of, I want to say it was underneath their robes. There was another one too where it was an anonymous woman lawyer blogger. I can't remember where it was, but it was an associate at a large company who had hired me, I think essentially to do his assignments that he was being given. I'm not sure. I decided if anyone was walking an ethical line, it was him, not me. And so that was one of my first assignments other and then I was doing work for people locally, lawyers that I'd known, and I also did some work for, uh, Ed Fiondoc, who ultimately asked me to be of counsel to his firm. So it definitely, I think, helped me reach other lawyers, and it was also just and I also did work for, a judge locally who then asked me to co-author Criminal Law in New York with her, which is a Thomson Reuters substantive law treatise, which I did for a decade. So it absolutely, I think, helped show people that wanted to hire me, showcase my writing skills, showcase my analytical thinking skills in a way that made it a lot easier for them to, hire me if they hadn't worked with me previously when I was practicing.
Yeah, I mean, because you did something that, like, I didn't do. I'm sitting there writing blog posts, and knocking them off in 45 minutes, and they're not very long. Um, all of a sudden, I saw that you and Carolyn were doing a book. You were doing other you had may have done a book. I don't know if you did a book on criminal law in New York or something. I don't
Yeah,
remember.
that was the book I did with the judge. It was Criminal Law in New York.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there thinking, "This is high-powered stuff." So it was beyond my league, as I thought. Although now people are telling me to do a book on publishing, and I've got some outlines of something, to
Nice.
do. But you hit on a point that is true. By being out there doing this, whether you wanna call it blogging, publishing, social media, whatever, you tend to meet people, and you bump into opportunities just because you build relationships with people. How many years was it from, like, that time year when you did the book on well, you did a book on the social media, but then you did the book on the cloud, didn't you?
Right. So
How many years was it before you did the book on the cloud then, from after you did the social media book?
so the social media book was published by the ABA in 2010. And I had an editor there at that point, and I pitched the idea of cloud computing for lawyers to him. And we signed a contract, and that was published in January, February 2012.
Yeah, I mean, think of that. I mean, we laugh about it now, but the idea that we would store information on the internet as opposed to a local drive on a computer or a local network that we would store in an office was a big deal that you were writing about. And then I got a call from somebody or an email that became must have been founding what, MyCase? Uh,
Well, the person I think you spoke to was Klaus Schauser, and I think it was
okay,
at Legal Week. I could be wrong, but Klaus
okay.
Schauser was the founder of GoToMeeting and GoToMyPC, and then he later co-founded AppFolio.
AppFolio,
They were
that's right.
out in the legal space and spoke to you, and I think what Klaus told me was that you had told him to to reach out to me because I was writing a book on cloud computing.
Yeah, because I didn't know. I mean, he's calling me up, and what do I know as running a publishing company about cloud computing per se? I knew that our stuff was hosted in the cloud from the day one, and I knew that we used Salesforce to keep all of our data from the day we founded too. But law firms, no idea. So
Yeah.
so I just wanted to be nice and gave him your
Yeah.
name and gave him your name.
Well,
Instead, she might know of some, Nikki might know of somebody, or maybe she could help you.
Well, what had happened was Klaus and another guy, this is in, I want to say about 2010, reached out to me and I had a conversation with him over the phone. And I told him it's too early to get into legal. Like, they're not open to the cloud. I'm working on this book, but, lawyers aren't using the cloud. And what subsequently happened was that when my cloud book came out in 2012, I was hired. I met Matt Spiegel I'd met him once before. Um, I saw him at Legal Week, and a couple of months later, we had another phone call and he demoed MyCase and he offered to hire me. And so he hired me in April 2012. And a couple of months later, he's either called me, I think he called me and he's like, do you know this guy called Klaus Schauser? And I'm like, "It sounds familiar," and I searched my email, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I talked to him," and he's like, "Well, I just had lunch with him, and they're considering acquiring my case, and, your name came up," and Klaus was like, "Oh, I know Nikki," and I told him, "We just hired Nikki," and so it definitely, I think and they acquired us a couple months later. And that was when MyCase sort of really took off. And, you know, we're in a whole different place now, and we've been acquired a few times, but, um, and now our home base is 8am, the parent company of MyCase,
Right.
the team behind MyCase, LawPay, CasePure, and DocketWise. But that was, I think that you're referring him to me in that subsequent conversation. Really, the fact that he knew me helped kind of lay the groundwork for that first acquisition that really set MyCase on the path to where it is today.
And I would have never known you but for blogging. I mean, I mean, really, I would have never met you in Chicago, never would have heard about you writing these books. I don't know that enough lawyers know that doing business is all about relationships with people. It really is. It's getting to know people, building trust. You might hear of an opportunity to do something that you wouldn't have heard but for that. And it's not always trying to get the most hits on your blog or your search performance and all those type of things. It's the relationships that you build through that. When you got that opportunity to work in the company, then go through the acquisition, and I mean, I were you pretty pumped up about the thing? I would be. I would be going, this is kind of interesting. I mean, compared to X number X number of years ago when you were a practicing lawyer, all of a sudden to doing this type of work. And your peers from law school weren't doing that.
For sure, and it was, since I'd started blogging in 2005, I'd become really interested in the legal technology space, and, I was writing about it, and so it was super exciting to be part of a small startup, and then that acquisition happened so quickly, and then a couple of years later, Folio IPO'd, and I was the only MyCase employee that they flew down along with 20 other employees from the company for the IPO and NASDAQ. So I got to be a part of an IPO, which
Yeah.
was really cool and certainly was not on my bingo card for my life, let alone that year. So it was, I was on a completely different path than I ever expected that I would be. And it absolutely wouldn't have happened but for blogging and those relationships. And that's what I always tell my kids is it's a matter of putting yourself out into the universe in different ways, and blogging is certainly one of them, but that's where when you put yourself out there, opportunities will come to you, but if you don't do that, then you're kind of gonna miss a lot of potential partnerships or connections that could really help you down the road.
Yeah, I mean, your kids have stood to benefit too. I mean, by virtue of the earnings you receive or the stock you receive and your company going public, they they get to go to nice college. No, I mean, it's kind of an amazing story what you went through, going from, a public defender's office, then into private practice, doing some work, doing some publishing, probably people are starting to see you more. And X number of years later, you're inside a company that's going public and down in the public offering. That's pretty cool.
Well, that was Appfolio, 8 AM
Yeah,
is not. Just
yeah,
to
but
just to clear that
but
up.
I understand. I'm not saying I shouldn't say now, but they now it's the thing. I've gotten to know 8 AM just through the conference and some things through that. Um, going back to what we just talked about, though, is it possible for let's not say students, but any young person to get out there and just begin to network and express themselves still online? I mean, to me, it seems doable. I'm online and I meet people every day, and that I follow up with in some capacity. I don't know what your take is on it right now.
Well, I always go back to a really good example of it's a way to connect and meet other people, right? So there was somebody, and I later looked him up to see where his career went, but it was probably about a decade ago, who's maybe 8, 9 years ago, who started to, he happened to live in DC. And so he would go to all the oral arguments at the Supreme Court and he would write about them and
I
not,
remember that.
there's no one else that was doing that. And I know that he eventually ended up with a career in like as a journalist somewhere, but it really kind of came from that. And he was doing something that no one else was doing, and, like, other people I've seen have sort of launched into this and interviewed other, they reach out and they start a podcast or they write articles where they summarize their interview, blog posts where they summarize the interview with different legal technology, you know, people in the space like you and I. So it's and I've seen people successfully kind of launch themselves into legal tech by doing that. So there are a lot of different approaches, and I think that you have to in some ways look at where you think you want to go and then try to think of a strategic interesting way to get there that can absolutely include blogging, and blogging sometimes may feel old school, but another example that I have right now is my husband, he's an ICU nurse, but he took a whole bunch of courses in making wine, and he made wine last year in our basement, and he's worked in a bunch of wineries here in the Finger Lakes, and this year he's making wine in a winery in a way that allows us to sell it online next year. And I started a blog, and ChatGPT certainly helps me do this, but I've started this blog that kind of focuses on just us and our love of wine and the way it's progressed over the years and what he's doing with making wine. And it's really been a very successful way to kind of get our sort of story out there, to kind of lay the groundwork for this very small kind of side project, which would be selling a couple hundred cases of wine. I mean, we're talking it's
Right.
little, you know what I mean? But online is like a sort of a hobby of ours, kind of. But, that's been another way to kind of get the word out, to hopefully get people that will want to go and buy it once we launch this online store with a small amount of wine.
It's
So,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah, and whether you call it, blogging, publishing, or whatever, Dave Weiner's been popping his head up again lately about it is just whatever it is, Um, I think I can't think of Doc's last name right now. He wrote it recently, and hey, it is what it is. It's publishing, it's writing, it's publishing. And one of the things we're working on right now at LexBlog is not losing all this stuff. Not
right,
only did we see TypeAd putting up like some ungodly amount of legal publishing, and we do have yours whether you want it or not. It's on the warehouse shelf, um, and to save it all. And then I found out that the large firms were throwing away their articles, like some after 6 years because it was hurting their SEO and stuff. And you realize all this good stuff that the lawyers wrote shouldn't go. There has to be a library for this. So we're working that angle now, in addition to just having the printing press. So it's cool what you did. Now you're all the way though to a larger company. I was at a conference a couple 3 weeks ago in Austin, Kaleidoscope, put on by 8am. Who is 8am and what is it comprised of for multiple companies and multiple customer base?
well, so in the middle of the pandemic, MyCase was carved out, is what they call it. I since learned, out of Appfolio, the company that had owned us for 8 years, and it was acquired by Apex, which is a private equity firm. And for 18 months, they owned MyCase. And during that time, we acquired a number of legal software companies, including CasePeer and DocketWise. And then in June of 2022, the parent company of LawPay, which is a company that most lawyers know because it's been around for a long time. It's a trusted tool that lawyers use to securely and ethically, in a compliant fashion, process payments, right? So it helps lawyers get paid using credit card, and LawPay's partner with bar associations across the country, and hundreds of thousands of lawyers use LawPay. And so when I learned that we were being acquired by the parent company of LawPay, which at the time was called AffiniPay, I was honestly so pleasantly surprised, like almost ecstatic, because I knew we were being acquired when I learned about this, and there were so many different companies went through my mind, and there were some companies I definitely did not want us to be acquired by, because those are places where companies would go to die, right? So I was excited when I learned that it was AffiniPay, and so they acquired us in June of 2022. They had deep knowledge of the legal industry and of lawyers, and so it's been wonderful to be part of this company that, coming in from a personal perspective, they knew who I was. They understood the value that I brought to the table. The person that I report to is Gabby Cubero, who was the co-founder of CasePeer, who has a in-depth understanding of the legal industry. And so a couple months, actually I think it was last month. It's a lot's happened since then. My AffiniPay rebranded to 8am. That was in August that they rebranded. And then our first conference ever, Kaleidoscope, was at the beginning of September. And so it was really exciting to, s- you know, have this rebrand where 8am, sort of the start of a new day, and the time of the day when you start getting going and you get things done, is sort of the concept behind that. To have this rebrand and then have this inaugural conference. The conference was fantastic. It was exactly what we'd hoped, which was this intimate. We wanted it to be small enough that we could control every single aspect of it to make sure that the attendees had the best possible experience, and with speakers that were really engaging. And by all accounts, it really was a success. And it was a really exciting thing to be a part of. And next year, it's going to be in Vegas. So it's going to be great to have this annual tradition moving forward.
It was a good kind. I was there, and and because it wasn't so overwhelming, it wasn't like 2 or 3,000 people. Um, and so I'm walking around the first morning, and I go, "Okay, what's my focus gonna be?" I go, "Well, I used to be, um, a small town lawyer, a small firm lawyer, and I've gotten too far removed from small lawyers with a lot of the big clients that we have." Um, and sometimes if I walk in to those conferences with the big firm clients and who services those big clients, do I really feel in touch with those people? I was really wondering that. So I go, I'm gonna grab breakfast. I'm gonna go sit down with these lawyers that I know. And it was wonderful. It was great. I got the feeling I got to know them. I got to ask them what they did, why they were here, what they were got out of the conference. The lawyers would brag about which products they use, which were partners. They would
Yeah.
say, "Hey, you got to go out there and talk to these people. It's really good." And then they'd be writing that down. I think the lawyers got a lot out of it from everything I
Yeah.
saw.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed, and I don't know how, I think you may have mentioned it when we were there, but there was a real intimate relationship between the stage and the audience. So oftentimes when you're at conferences, the stage might be there and you might have a moderator with a couple people. And then at the end, they'll say, okay, we got time for two questions or something like that. This wasn't like that. There were a lot of questions that went back and forth from the people on the stage to the people in the audience. What facilitated that? I mean, do you know what made that happen? Did you have it in mind as to what you were trying to do?
Well, I think part of it was the quality of the speakers that we brought in. There are people that speak all the time and understand the value of the conversations versus just talking at people. And I
Right.
also think that the conference was set up in a way both in terms of varying the length of the sessions and the different topics that we tried that we included to make sure that we covered a whole variety of issues that would be of interest. I think, and I think the fact that it was not this huge, overwhelming setting with thousands of people, it made because it felt more intimate. I think people felt more comfortable talking and having conversations rather than being passive, recipients of information. So I think it was just a combination of a bunch of different factors.
Yeah. I mean, there was I think it was right before lunch or whatever, and somebody had asked the question, well, I'm leaving or no, I have my practice. My wife's going to join me in the practice. She just had a baby or whatever. And somebody goes, "Is that your wife sitting right next to you who was pregnant?" And he goes, "Yes." And I thought that was really, it was very intimate. And then I got to speak with them after during lunch. I just said, "Hey, can I sit down next to you and chat?" So I hope everybody else had that type of experience. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I also thought it was pretty good. It was very, you could approach the officers in the company, and I don't know that they were all used to having people come up to them and talk with them, but they were very approachable.
Well, they're there for a reason. We made sure that we had lots of different people across all aspects of the company there, and everybody was encouraged to mingle and to talk to everybody. So they were there with that intent.
What do you most like about 8am? Like when you're saying there were these other companies that maybe I didn't want to be in. What do you most like about it?
Well, you know, I've been on this MyCase ship for a long time, and the people around me that have been running it and working on it have changed. I feel like I'm on this ship and it's moving along, and I'm like on it, and the people making the ship go are all
Right.
around me and changing. And so I'm very committed to kind of the outcome or the success of my case. And, um, you know, 8 a.m. was, such a perfect home because they do understand the industry. And for me, from my role, it's super helpful to be able to talk to, Keely, who I work with in PR, with Tracy, who runs our affinity program with all the bars, to my supervisor, Gabby. And instead of having to, explain, I'm speaking at this conference. This conference is run by a bar association. And it's a subcommittee of the bar association that puts this conference on. And it's in bar association does this. Like before, there are people that didn't know what bar associations is. So I'd have to explain what a bar association is, explain why it was relevant for me to be there and why it was an important conference. And then I would have to validate the audience that was going to be there. It's going to be solo and small firms. We're going to have a couple hundred of them. they're covering my expenses because I almost always do. But even then, there were all these questions like, where are you going and why are you doing this? And or after the fact.
Right.
But now it's just absolutely, I'm going to speak at this bar association. Perfect, great. Love, sounds great, and or we're also, exhibiting there. So let's see how we can tie these things together and make sure that we're all on the same page and then we make the most out of you speaking there. So it just to me, from my personal standpoint, it's just so much easier when you're in a company that understands the industry really well, has people that are devoted to understanding the industry so that you can understand the customer, so that you can understand the customer's needs and ultimately meet them where they're at, provide them with the best tools that they need, but also speak their language. And they can speak their language because they speak that language, not, and when I talk to them, they speak the language. So it just makes it so much easier. And it's a wonderful company. The company culture is great. It's great to have a woman CEO. There's a lot of other women executives at the top of the company, which is also nice. It's really got a lot of diversity. I really enjoy it. It's a great company to work for.
Yeah, I was always impressed by her. When you do the dinners in New York and things like that, you really felt like you were being treated first class and that they cared about who you were and getting to know the people. Obviously, you're incredibly passionate about the company, so you could be their biggest ambassador. But what is your role? Is it to connect the company with lawyers? I mean, what do you view your responsibility? What's success for Nikki Black vis-a-vis 8am?
Well, so my title is Principal Legal Insight Strategist, and I think of myself as internally and externally bridging lawyers and technology. So externally, I do have a very significant role externally where I continue to do the thing that I've always done, which is help lawyers understand new emerging and useful technologies and how to use them and incorporate them into their practices by writing articles for the ABA Journal, Daily Record, Above the Law, the 8am blog, and speaking at conferences across the country. I mean, that's something I've always done. And that's my bread and butter. Like that's what I love to do. And then internally, I am the bridge between the people building the products and selling them and marketing them to lawyers and the lawyers. So I'm on the product team now. I moved over there about 6 months ago. So I'm on the product team. And when we initially started talking about rolling out AI into our products, I was on this strategy committee that was deciding what that might look like. I help test the AI products internally. I work closely with PR and marketing. I sometimes write for the blog. I help them determine what's trending, topics that, we should be talking about, people that we might want to bring in to speak at the conference, topics we might want to talk about at the conference, topics we might want to cover in webinars. I'm not on those teams that do those things, but I'm like an internal consultant almost across teams for a bunch of different issues like that.
No, it's pretty cool. Yeah, we should talk, or I should talk to somebody about your company's blog getting into our library because we have about 60,000 lawyers in there, and you probably cover some pretty good tech things on the blog. And that's what we're trying to do is to build that library so people can start to see it in different types of ways. I thought it's great talking with you. You're an incredible inspiration for the field.
Thanks.
First,
Likewise.
I met you through the blog, meeting a person that's practicing, what I remember was some relationship to criminal defense, in New York, and became extremely well known from the blog. Then you get into tech. Now I look at what you just rattled off. That is very impressive. And if I'm reading that correctly, if you didn't start to publish in some fashion, people wouldn't have known that about you.
Oh,
Wouldn't have got it.
if I hadn't started blogging, there's no way I'd be where I am today. I would probably still just be doing, and I don't mean just, but I would
Right.
probably be doing work for other lawyers locally, and I probably would have ended up with a firm, I'm sure, doing stuff that I enjoyed, but what wouldn't have been nearly as passionate about as I am with what I do now. And I would have a very different life. I certainly wouldn't have had the opportunity to have pre-IPO stock options and stock grants and equity in our current company. I mean, I can't complain about any of that. And I've had a really lucky path.
Oh, it's great. It was great to have you on. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed it.